Hello and welcome to another Casual 60 deck design. Today I'm going to be showing one of my more entertaining decks, something that actually can be somewhat competitive considered by some people, I suppose. This is a precon optimization. A friend and I, we used to do this essentially all the time. Anytime there was a dual deck or some kind of precon that had a specific set symbol, this one is the Fire and Lightning one. We would actually get those and try to optimize them to the best and fullest potential. It was a fun way of being competitive and casual, especially when you get the dual decks, because usually, even if, for example, we got the Sorin versus Tibalt ones that came out not too long ago. We bought 4 of those total, and he got all the Sorins, I got the Tibalts, so he made a really powerful token kind of deck, and I took the Tibalts out of everything, and I just made a really good black-red kind of burnout deck. But that optimization, like running play sets of the powerful cards in the deck, makes it actually pretty strong. Of course, some of the precons are just not so strong, like Phyrexian versus the Coalition. Giant Phyrexian Colossus deck is kind of cute, but not really as strong as, for example, this one. This is, again, the Fire and Lightning one. It is a burn deck. Optimizing this was always fun. I've always liked Legacy Modern and Standard Burn. There's a lot of stuff in here that actually, like when I tell an opponent, I'm just playing a precon that's optimized. They think they're just going to raffle stomp me, and then I whip this thing out, and then they die. Sometimes, of course, against a really strong deck in Standard, they may be able to counteract it, but a lot of times they don't expect the consistency of a precon that's been optimized actually come back. I've done this again with a lot of decks previously, like the Duels of the Planeswalkers, some of the dual deck ones. I did the Sliver one, that was all foil as well. I've wanted to do the Graveborn one, but I don't like spending money on Magic, and it's a lot easier to trade, and trading for those entombs is kind of rough. I've already designed the deck. I don't actually have the cards for it, so I may put it together eventually. But let's start. So as that precon, the trick here is I have a very select, limited supply, like a very few cards that I can actually pick from. And this makes it really good because this makes it a casual deck I can play casually with, but it also is really good at training people or teaching someone how to design a deck. Because I can sit down with a giant stack of play sets of cards that all have the same set symbol. And while I have one side of a dual deck, they can have the other side, and I can say, let's design a deck together to play against each other. And then all of a sudden they're put in a situation where they have a selection of cards that essentially all work well with each other, and then they get to put it together, and it's kind of helping them build something and steering them in the right direction. These premium foil ones, of course, are not dual decks, so this is one I have actually kept. It's always fun, and I like red, and burn is good. So per this deck, I'm running some Spark Elementals, the playset of them. This is a really good card. It fits that classic burn desired tempo, where 1 mana costing 1 card equates to 3 damage. Although the possible chump blocker kind of hurts. But either way, again, I have a select few cards I can pick from when this deck was being designed. So this is what I'm running. Hellspark Elemental is another version of Spark Elemental for 1 more, but he has Unearth, so he can come back for more. And the final creature in the deck is actually Ball Lightning. This is something you should not be seeing in competitive burn decks, because again, it's a 1 mana costing possible 6 damage, or 3 mana possible 6 damage, but it's just not what you really want to be doing on 3rd turn. But that's actually it for the creatures. This deck, it does kind of suck to run into someone running like Blind Obedience or something like that, because that nerfs 12 of my cards. But again, this is a casualty deck, so I don't really care half the time what's in your deck. Wouldn't be a burn deck without the actual staple itself, Lightning Bolt. And the only thing better than running a Lightning Bolt is essentially running another playset of Lightning Bolts, although at sorcery speed. Chain Lightning is the expensive card of the dual deck. Essentially, it's just another Lightning Bolt at sorcery speed, where potentially someone could pay to redirect it back to you, and then fun things happen then. Flames of the Bloodhand used to be really popular. It's been kind of outclassed nowadays by Skullcrack. Skullcrack is essentially 1 mana cheaper, does 1 damage less, but both of these stop an opponent from gaining life, which is really good. And sadly, I'm limited to cards. I don't have a great selection. Like, I don't have Searing Blaze, which I would love to have put in this deck. I was even fighting myself to use full arts just to remove worse cards like Hammer. I've never actually been in a position where I wanted to recur Hammer back to my hand, but I mean, it's another burn spell, I suppose. And finally, the goodie, the one that usually just wins us out of nowhere, is Fire Blast, sacking lands to do 4 damage for free at instant speed. That's usually a game ender there. Most people, you can usually gauge someone's level of experience against burn when they react to this card, because they'll see the 6 mana, instant speed, 4 damage compared to Lightning Bolt. But then you'll know very quickly if they think it's rubbish if they've never played against it, when at the end of the game and you're at 3 or less life or 4 life on the dot, and this is all it takes. This is another card that hopefully you do not see people playing in Legacy or Modern. Browbeat is a tricky card. I like it because I like them all. It's always fun to see Jessica quotes. This is a trap. Even though it looks good, giving the opponent a choice is never good. So yeah, they may be in a situation where they will just let you draw because they're about to control the board, or they're going to take the life because you haven't done so well already. But again, this is a limited deck, so I only have so many cards to play with. Really fun thing with Browbeat, although, is casting a Reverberate on Browbeat, because that obviously the opponent's choices are doubled, but the choices become not just taking 5 or you drawing 3, it becomes taking 10 and nothing or something like that. Reverberate is essentially another burn spell. I try to hold on to this with the bolts so I can do 6 damage. But of course, it's always fun. Again, this is something that hopefully you do not see in a lot of Legacy decks. There's no need for Reverberate in a competitive burn deck. But we're actually to the lands. They're all basic except for the Tainted, or not Tainted, the Teetering Peaks, because these are funny with the creatures that have trample. So I might actually want to hold back on one of the 1, 2, or 3 drop creatures if I know I can give it an extra boost of power. Because this land then becomes essentially a shock to the opponent's face if they cannot block it, or they cannot kill the creature. So I didn't want to put too many tap lands in here. I think there's only, what, 2 or 3? Yeah, there's only 3, and the rest are just mountains. That is my current design for the cards in this particular set. Again, there's not a lot of cards that came out. They essentially gave you 60 cards to play with. There's some good and some bad. I do have a few extra cards I was tinkering with. I sometimes do switch around the deck. It is currently designed for 1v1, but I do a lot of multiplayer. So I have some extra junk in here. For example, I have a playset of Fire Servants. The option of making a Lightning Bolt burn for 6 is great. Obviously, something like this would never survive a turn for you to take advantage of that against a proper opponent, but in casual or against different quality of opponents, this becomes really amusing, because I may even want a chump blocker if there's more than 3 players, for example. Playing burn in multiplayer is naturally not a good idea, because the idea there, the Lightning Bolt challenge, is that for your 1 to 3 damage, you start the game with 7 cards in hand. So assuming you all have Lightning Bolt effects, those 7 cards should equate to about 21 damage. But of course you have the chance to play land and draw over the turns that you have to cast them. Doing that in multiplayer is impossible, because you will run out of fuel before you kill everybody. So in multiplayer I usually put more gimmicky junk in there, like the hammer and whatnot. But that is the Fire and Lightning precon. I don't have a lot of my optimizations left anymore. I've been selling a lot of stuff lately to help support somebody. But this is one that I've always enjoyed, because it's actually very entertaining to say that you just have some kind of precon with you and not have your opponent expect to actually get burnt out as quickly and as efficiently as a precon can. Although this is not obviously strictly the precon, it is optimized. But I always actually suggest this. If you have newer people to the game, they understand the rules, but you're wanting to build like a casual deck with them, so you have something on par with them to play, go get like a pair or more of a dual deck that seems interesting to you, or both of you, because that that gives you both a selection of cards to play with and change the decks around with, and it also gives that person the opportunity to learn about modifying and improving a deck. It's also very good for amplifying speed of a deck versus different deck archetypes, because you can always change your deck around to make it faster. They would have to then adapt. Things like that. It's pretty good for helping someone pick up the game. Of course, what I've done here is more of a not going to help you learn the game. This is a burnout deck, but it's still pretty fun. But yeah, any ideas? If you've ever done anything like this, always share. This is kind of an interesting way of, like a more interesting take on a casual 60 deck, because I am actually optimizing something with the intent of winning around outside of a theme. This is more of a restricted casual deck. And doing those restrictions are always fun. I actually still run technically I have 2 restricted EDH decks. One is an Urabrask, the hidden EDH deck, where the entire deck has to have the Phyrexian watermark except for the basic lands. And I have a Basandra, the Angel, the red-white one, which is all Commander 2011. I've always been tempted to add the Commander's Arsenal or 2013 cards to it, but I haven't yet. So I'll eventually show those too. Self-restricted decks are a fun challenge, because you are limiting yourself to a card pool. It's a little bit more restricted than standard, for his example, but of course not everyone does that, and there's no real opponent for a self-restricted deck like that other than your own casual group. But yeah, any ideas, I'm always welcome to feedback. Thanks.